Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our fourth and final session in this series, Defining Moments for Your Team. This morning, we're going to be talking about succession planning. And I want to introduce Bruce, Boucher, and myself. Anthony was having a little bit of technical difficulties, so we're going to go ahead and get started, and hopefully he can join us soon. So Bruce Boucher is the president of Roos Advisors, and he is also the head of the Masters of Human Resources Department at Utah State University. He is SHRM certified and speaks in several SHRM chapter events all over the world. And he speaks about HR, leadership, and how to develop the teams that drive our companies, who at Roos Advisors we believe are our most important assets. Bruce lives in Salt Lake City, Utah with his family, and I'm really just grateful to have him as my partner on this adventure that we're doing together. And I'm Larendee Roos, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer and founder of Roos Advisors. And I live in the New York, New Jersey area. And I am formerly the Executive Vice President of Acquisitions and Operations for Extra Space Storage prior to starting Roos Advisors 17 years ago. And at Roos Advisors, we are in the business of helping companies grow and thrive. And we do that through education and consulting. And we also have a recruiting division that is responsible for recruiting, retention, and education. We're key and very stealth in the areas of sales and marketing and operational improvements and efficiencies, as well as being a great strategic partner when it comes to determining what to do around your finances. And today what we're talking about is succession planning. So welcome, Bruce. I'm going to turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. It's nice to be back. This is our fourth and final session with you. And as Larendee said, we are missing Anthony with some technical difficulties this morning, but always appreciate his invitation to join with us. And in our introductions, Larendee mentioned her affiliation in real estate. And actually, that's where I cut my HR teeth, developing teams and trying to make sure that we have exactly the amount of talent that we need. And I want to start out this morning just by reminding us all, the end game is to win, right? It's not just to stockpile a bunch of talent, nor is it to just simply function from a bootstrap perspective and always hope or wish that you have the right people. Right? This is to win, and in order for us to win, we have to have the best talent that we can find, that we can develop. And we oftentimes think that talent, and specifically leadership, is just something that we can find, right? It's an asset, and it's certainly a resource that's inexhaustible. And I'm just here to tell you that in spite of what happens in labor markets, great talent is not inexhaustible. It's something that we have to work to find and to keep, and specifically to make sure that that talent arrives at and helps us create value just at the right time. So today we want to take you through 5 different pieces of this succession planning to end our presentations. And really, the questions we'd like to answer today are, so first, what is succession planning? And when should you start succession planning, right? Who are the affected key stakeholders, and how often should you revisit your succession plan? Now, we all know that talent is critical and we want to win, right? But the other factor in this is that at some point, everyone in your organization will leave, including the owner, which may be you, right? The most key people eventually will leave, and we often think as if they're never going to go. They're going to be with us forever and ever. And you may have thought that. you yourself may have thought that. But the truth is, everybody's going to leave at some point. And so how do we prepare for that? What kind of steps do we take in an organization? I love what John Maxwell said. You can't have succession without a successor. You really have to be prepared to recognize that there really is going to be no success without a successor. So the true measure of success is not simply the health of the profit and loss statement or your balance sheet. I'm interested to know one trend that's happening in the public sector and private sector right now, particularly for publicly traded companies. They're not only looking at the P&L, they're not only looking at the ROIs, they're not only looking at what kind of performance financially the company has provided, but they want to know who's on the team. They want to know what kind of leadership we have in the team. And more companies are asking these questions about who's next up. What kind of process have you gone through to develop them? And are they really ready? These are people who are investing millions and millions of dollars, not only in a product, but in an idea or in a person or in a team. So the true measure of success isn't just that balance sheet, right? So in our succession planning, it's not just one and done. We don't just do it once. Okay, so we understand we've either 9-blocked or we've gone through our process and we understand who today's leaders are going to be. That's great, but that won't be sufficient a year from now or even 6 months from now. It's not a static process, and it's not only about staff and employee succession. In fact, it's succession planning throughout your organization. And something that we, I think, do a really good job of is recognizing the value of all the levels of employee and trying to help companies do that succession plan, not only for salespeople, for example, but even for the C-suite. And it's also about the industry and the company succession. What needs to happen next? How can we help pivot? What is our next directional intent for our company? All of these factors roll up into succession planning. So when should you start, right? What is it that we can do to begin this process? Well, the first and foremost is that oftentimes we run into individuals who want to hire just to get the hire done. And the truth of the matter is, we here in Utah with the Utah Jazz, we almost always make the playoffs. We almost always finish in the lower echelon of the playoffs teams. And we have a phrase here in Utah that rolls up to being this. We're going to take the best player in the draft, right? And that means we don't know if we're going to draft a center or a forward or a point guard, but we're going to take the best player in the draft. So first and foremost, as we're looking at our talent, we're trying to get to that point where we understand what our needs are. We want to look beyond just the immediate hire and the promotion, and we want to look for somebody who's got game, who's got the ability to grow with us, who's really going to add value to what we're trying to get done. And without a successor, you can't grow. Succession planning often results in the selection of a weaker representation of yourself. I'm going to hire somebody that looks like me. Well, that's great. The other mistake that we make is we want to hire somebody for the here and now, except for companies aren't static. And where we are today isn't where we're going to be a year from now. And the challenges that we're facing today may not be the challenges that we're going to face a year from now. We want to hire people who have game, who have the ability to grow with us, and who recognize that we're going forward. So who are the key stakeholders? What are some of the effects of not having a plan at all? Key stakeholders are often not considered, and these are the key stakeholders: employees, business owners, family members of employees and business owners, clients, vendors and suppliers, and our community. We need to get this right. we need to make sure that we are getting this right for all of these stakeholders, right? And that may seem like a really difficult thing to do, but it is possible. And we can help everyone understand more fully how to do it in a process that helps us to see down the road and prepare our business for those challenges that we might be facing. Go ahead, Larendee. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to you.
So we're looking at the frequency of how often we should be looking at this. And we really believe that it needs to be an ongoing discussion, and that it's not just something that happens in executive meetings and in management meetings, but it should center around this thing that we talked about last week, which is the culture of coaching. And so when you onboard someone, if they know that we are risk adverse around things that we know we can control, and one of those things that we can control is the loss of employees, or not having a plan in place should someone and when someone decides to leave our organization. So around this culture of coaching and letting people know from day one that we have succession planning in place for each individual helps the individual equally value themselves, their goals and desires, as well as the needs of the company. So we're going to take you now through the 5 steps. So step 1 is consider your bench. So this is another example of how we use the DISC program to help us through this very important exercise. And again, using DISC, which our company is certified in, and we believe is the beginning of a strong foundation for any discussion. We have the DISC for leaders. DISC for leaders shows that it's a one-to-many relationship. And throughout the process, we look at vision, we get vision, then we align, and then we execute. A really important principle and foundation to follow when we're talking about succession planning. Together as a team, you set this vision for growth and the future, and then you ensure each team member is aligned, which is step number 2, and then you get into execution stage. We also look at the DISC for managers tool, where DISC for managers is a one-to-one relationship, leadership one-to-many, managers one-to-one. In using the DISC for managers, we can assess and give guidelines for the one-to-many relationship, as well as focusing on the individual performance metrics, both attitudinally and skill sets, educations, and performance that will lead to that manager's success, or that employee or that staff member's success, which is part and integral to a well-defined succession plan. And then finally, we come back to our DISC Agile EQ, which if you didn't catch us last week, go back to our YouTube channel and you can learn more about DISC Agile EQ and how we believe it should be fundamental to any growing and thriving team to understand oneself and then understand others. So in this, remembering that DISC Agile EQ supports the individuals and the team culture when open-mindedness is required. And I don't know a time or a day that occurs in our world today on every level of our life, business, professional, personal, education, where open-mindedness is not required. So succession planning is all about being open to fresh perspectives and ideas. And then step 2, consider the industry and future trends. So very often we see in organizations they're looking at succession planning very narrowly and only with what's going on in the 4 walls of their company. And what we're inviting you to do is to look over the landscape and look beyond and consider industry, future, and trends when you're looking at your succession planning. Remember, we talked about the succession planning is not just about your individual assets, the humans who we believe are your most important asset. It's also about what's going to happen to your organization and your company in light of future trends. We also look at the recent past. What has shifted and changed in the last 3 to 5 years? Where we are today, what shifted in the last 3 to 5 months? Questions that we can ask ourselves. And then we also look at the upcoming projections. What's going on with consumer opinions and habits? What's going on environmentally in the health fields, financially, legal, local, global technology. So what this really means is that we need to have our eye on trends and what's going on in our industry, but also industries that support the industries that we're involved in or industries that we support, and just business on a global level. So how well have you adapted in the past? And which employees were resistant to the challenges that you were facing? Be aware of this, and who embraced the challenges, who's going to help you with the succession plan, who embraced opportunities. And then also identify the educated explorers. So educated explorers, we want explorers, we want pioneers, but we also want them to be well educated, and we want them to be invested. And so as we're looking at the agility of our team, we don't want pioneers who are rogue, but we want well educated and well trained. Again, we talked about last week that the average CEO reads upwards of 60 books a year, where the team members are reading on average of 5. So you see the gap. And you want to look, when you're succession planning, for those individuals who recognize the importance and ongoing requirement of personal and professional development. So as we're looking at this, now we're going to then take an opportunity to evaluate each management level. And as we evaluate that, what are the skill sets and mindsets that will be required as we move forward tomorrow, next week, next month, and in the years to come? And measure those skill sets and those mindsets against the current team members and those that you believe will be your successor. Bruce and I worked for we were partners with someone, and he always used to say, if you don't have your replacement already hired, you can't grow and you can't elevate to the highest of your capability. So evaluate what skill sets and mindsets are required against what the coming horizon is going to require. Alignment. Are they aligned now and in the future? Again, looking at their capabilities, skills, and education. Are they open and responsive to change? COVID has taught us that change is just around the corner very often in many unexpected ways. And we need individuals and key stakeholders and management in our organization to be open and responsive, flexible. And then how does their team measure up? A good indication of someone who understands and is ready for succession and growth into the next level has a well-oiled team working with them. So if we want to know the health of someone and how capable they're going to be as they move up into the next position, look at their team. How well is their team performing? And if we're having difficulties with their team, then chances are there's some room for an opportunity for improvement and growth there. Once we've identified what's going to be required, then we can build success profiles for each successor. Again, what are the educational skills? What are the education? What are the skills? What responsibilities will they need to take on that they're not currently taking on? And how easy is it for them to take on those responsibilities? How adept and agile are they in working towards new requirements? It really does require someone who's going to be part of your key succession planning really needs to be willing and open to change. And what is their emotional quotient? What is their emotional intelligence? What is their ability to bring in additional and new mindsets that maybe they haven't tried on in the past? If you don't have this person in your organization right now, then create an avatar, someone that you can begin to consider. And then create a timeline for success. How long will it take for us to really feel like we have a strong succession plan in place? And then finally, step 5 is to assess and develop the successor. So again, Bruce talked about earlier, this is not a one and done process. This isn't a set it and forget it. This is continuing to check in and using our culture of coaching that we talked about last week to help them set drivers for their own success and therefore the success of their teams. Also, again, remembering that learning needs to be constant. When I studied with Tony Robbins and Chloe Madonis, one of the things that they talked about in the 6 basic human needs is that the highest levels are growth and contribution. So this needs to be something that is innate within the people that you're working with and the teams that you're driving, that they have their own kind of DNA, that professional and personal development is important to them. How much of that personal and professional development is going to be company directed, and how much do you expect to be self-directed? Being very clear about this so that they know from day one what you'll be contributing as far as monetary contribution, degree upgrades, conferences, workshops, continuing education credits. What are you going to contribute as a company, and what will you expect for them as to be responsible for as they grow throughout the organization? And then again, putting together a timeline for success so that you're able to really know, and they're able to track as well where they are on the continuum. So with that, I'm now going to turn it back to Bruce, and we can talk about measuring success as we move into this final section. If any of you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and put those into your chat as you start to think of them, and then our host will help us bring those questions in. So any questions that you have or thoughts or things that you would like us to consider and talk about as we move into this final success piece of measuring for success. Go ahead, Bruce.
I want to refer you back to what Larendee was talking about in terms of using the DISC. And when we begin to measure success, again, we want to make sure that when the people that we hired a year ago, 6 months ago, or 3 months ago are actually measuring up, and they're actually helping us to improve our organization. Another measurement of success is the length of stay within the company. And I think we need to be a little bit cautious here, a little bit careful, because people who love coming to work, are satisfied in their job, appreciate the company, but don't necessarily help us to move things forward, have a tendency to stay. And so we need to make sure that we're encouraging them to continue to step up as well. But certainly, if we're blowing people out the door and our turnover in our organization is extremely high, that speaks to how we're developing people, and it also speaks in terms of how weak our bench really is. What is the buy-in of the culture throughout your organization? This speaks to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that's the idea of engagement. How engaged are our people? Are they buying into what we're doing, and are they looking forward to next steps? Are they asking you about what opportunities might be available to them in the future? And has your plan changed since prior evaluation? And we recommend revisiting this every 6 months. And in the current climate, it might be every 3 months. As you've now seen companies, and as you maybe have experienced these pivots that companies are making, one of the great questions that you can ask your employees is just simply to go back and ask them, how you doing? How's it going with the pivot? Are you with me? Do you understand? Are you all in? Are you underwater, or are you actually killing it? And what can I do to help you? Those kinds of things help us to stay connected in terms of how we are measuring success. So then as we go forward to the next slide, as you're creating your succession plan, it's also a good time to evaluate your onboarding process. If we really believe that our succession plan is directly tied to our onboarding, it's good to really recognize what it is that our systems are providing us. What is our recruiter helping us to achieve? Are we finding bodies, or are we finding difference makers? Are we finding people who really are making a difference? And so we actually encourage the following. How do you evaluate your ability to deliver client satisfaction according to your life cycle? And those life cycles, if anything has occurred in the last few months, it is this: life cycles have changed dramatically. And are we up to speed with it? Do we understand it? Do we get what our client's pivot looks like? How will the team member know that they're successfully filling the role? Folks, this is a critical question, and I want to be clear here. There are so many employees working for us and for other people who simply don't know when they win. They are clueless when it comes to understanding how it is they win. This seems to me to be the simplest thing that we can help them understand. This is how you win, and reinforce that over and over again. Effective team members onboarding goes beyond ensuring that they have essential tools, right? Effective onboarding ensures that they know how to evaluate company success and that they contribute to the success by bringing in the talent that we need to win. So hopefully, as we've considered all of these different things specific to onboarding, we hope that you found this 4-segment series helpful. We've tried to be very logical and very methodical as we've broken down the importance of what we've shared in these 4 sessions. So at this point, we'd love to take a few minutes and answer any questions. If you'd like to send us questions through chat, we would love to answer those questions for you. And Larendee, I'll turn the closing back to you.
So one of the things that we often are asked is education or is skill set more important? And what we would say to that is that both are important. And whether you received an Ivy League education, or you have someone who grew up in your organization who maybe went to a local university or a school that maybe wasn't Ivy League, the most important thing is the continuing growth and continuing nurture and nourishment of that human and that individual, both of themselves, so that they're self-driven, and as well as your ability to sow into that organization. So is there a best practice to succession planning? Yes, we believe that there is. And again, we always start with who are the humans that you serve? Who are the clients that you serve? How is your company going to pivot? What changes are going to be required from them in order to continue to service those clients and to stand in the highest gold standard service to them? And then evaluating from there who the humans are internally and who the internal customers are that as management we are working with and nurturing. We do have a process that we take companies through, but looking at these 5 basic steps, if you just asked yourself these questions, you'd be well on your way. And how do we do succession planning without leaving people out is another question that came in. Well, the way that we do that is, again, from the day someone is hired, perhaps even in the interviewing process, begin to talk about that our company is risk adverse when it comes to things that we have control over. And the human capital that we have within our organization and that we can grow, we can control our ability to have a culture of coaching, growth, and expansion. What the human assets that come into that fold, whether they contribute to it, buy into it, then that's on them. But we really believe that it starts from day one, and that every single person in your organization should have a personal succession plan. This is how we keep employees motivated. Actually, it's how we keep people tied into their own self-motivation, but we provide a fertile soil for them to be able to grow and thrive. And how much time should I spend in succession with all the other stuff I have? Well, when it becomes part of what you do every day, then it really becomes the exponential, or what Bruce and I call the 10X factor. A strong succession plan and a culture of succession and growth within your organization will pay off big dividends. So then when this occurs, you make the time and you find the time, because companies who have good succession plans and who believe that their people are the solution to that will have better performance, better performing employees, which then provides time for the C-suite, the CEO, the business owner to spend more time in their creative energy. But if as a CEO or the C-suite, you're trying to control all the outcomes, we're really hurting ourselves. And we're not tapping into the potential that is within each and every human that potential and that spark that is within each of us. And it's just a matter of determining whether we're the right fertile soil for them to land in and grow, or whether there's another opportunity. We talked about that in one of our other sessions, that sometimes the biggest gift we can give ourselves and to that human is to help them find the next best opportunity for them. And in this way, everyone's dignity, everyone's respect remains intact. So we really appreciate the time you've spent with us over the last 4 weeks. Please check us out. We're at www.roosadvisors.com, and we look forward to seeing how we can help you grow and nurture your teams. Have a great week.